you ever win anything out of a claw machine that you weren't supposed to?
I'm not good with the claw. Those things. First off, they're completely rigged. You can't actually.
Are they?
Well, they're not completely.
They have to follow state
rigged.
laws.
They're not completely rigged.
It's the same probability as anything else. 1 in 75, I think, for the.
Those claws have no grip power.
1 out of every 75 times they have to. That's how the game works. That's the rigging.
Because
they wouldn't be able to be licensed by the state gaming commission if they didn't have an algorithm.
Whenever you try to clamp down on that teddy bear that you want to win, it looks like it has the grip strength of your 80-year-old grandma. You line it up real good, it lowers in, and then they very ever so feebly attempt to grasp something, and it just comes right back off. It's like, sorry, Jimmy, Grandma can't handle the weight of that teddy.
You're right, though. It is kind of like someone maybe they just put the glove on. They're trying to figure out which way to twist it to stick the hand in.
I never was big on the crane game anyway, but I did do the skeet ball a little bit.
You mean skee ball?
Did I say skeet ball? Is it skeet shooting?
Yeah, I don't want to play skeet ball anytime. No.
Skee ball, yes.
Well, anybody that's been to the beach, has been to the Jersey Shore, has played skee ball. Or if you used to have a mall in your town.
I bet Dave & Buster's has skee ball.
Nothing really changed except now the balls are plastic and, they make the shit all flashier.
And you still have to pump like $95 worth into the thing to win a pencil?
Interestingly, the Boardwalk in Wildwood still has an arcade where every day, and I was there a couple times for it when we were in Wildwood last year, the arcade guy, they still have an arcade with a dude that walks around with a microphone like in the 80s and 90s.
That makes me happy.
And he has a skee ball tournament there at like 1 o'clock p.m. every day.
Nice.
And people win straight up cash money. And it's just old school skee ball tables and this dude, waddling around with his belt full of quarters and his microphone connected to a wire.
Is he wearing a bow tie and a top hat?
No, he's just like one of them old Jersey Shore looking dudes. He's got a little bit of salt and pepper, a little waviness, a little stash, a little rape stash going on.
Oh, you mean the rare
little polo shirt with the collar flipped up. Great place, though, and if I remember the name of it, there are 2 arcades in Wildwood that are considered retro. One of them's in the basement of the Boardwalk Mall. That's not the one I'm talking about. I'm talking about the one that has the skee ball tournaments and the money machine. Because the other thing that can happen is I think sometimes just for, registering to be in the skee ball tournament, you get, a chance in the money machine, which is sweet.
I'm still trying to get over the thought of these Jersey Shore carnies.
They're not carnies, though. It's a completely different because you have to remember they're not on trailers. Their games are not hooked up to trailers.
That's true. They're permanent fixtures.
They are shop owners.
At least 6 months out of the year.
And some of them have a flair for being able to bring people in and make them feel like, hey, this is its own separate experience.
They got that Ric Flair drip.
If that makes me a carny, listen. If getting waffles and ice cream and going to the skee ball tournament makes me a carny, then I'm public carny number 1 then.
No, the customers are never the carnies. The carnies are the Cletus the slack-jawed yokel types who hold together the tilt-the-world with duct tape.
Those carnies are the ones that try to get you to do the ring toss. And if you've seen a crooked game at a fair, then you've seen a cranked-up version of that crooked game at the Boardwalk, where they put out the lights and the big prizes, the 20-foot-tall stuffed frog that you can win, and that's all the same scam. Those people are carnies because they're the ones wearing headsets that are trying to interfere with people getting an innocent snack. And they're going, oh, do you want to win the lady something decent for once? They start heckling you.
Isn't the tiger cute? It's a huge Hello Kitty.
Yeah, but for a while there, the arcades were turned into these sterilized little lame-ass rooms with colorful carpeting where, they had a bunch of machines you could win tickets on, but it's like, where's the arcade games at? But there's still a couple out there.
They're almost a thing of the past. So, sir, do you feel that now that we're 5 minutes into this banter, maybe we should properly introduce ourselves just in case some random person is listening who doesn't know what they clicked on?
I'd be for it.
All right. Welcome, everybody. This is the Shoedogg and Mike podcast.
Are you counting on that happening?
Random people just
someone being like, why am I letting this load?
Even if it's a Russian bot, I don't care. But anyway, thank you for hanging out with us. This is our 11th big episode. You know what they say in showbiz? It goes to 11. Maybe we'll even get to 12. Hang tight as we get through to that. So, big episode for us here as we've been building up our spider web of being in every corner of the internet. We've now completed the beyond the trifecta by getting onto iTunes. So pretty much wherever you get a podcast, you can find us, and that is where I bring in Mr. Mike. Mike's going to let you know where to tell Grandma to download us, or even if you just steal her phone and download us on her behalf, that'd be fine too.
Streaming is, you said, Stitcher and Spotify, and obviously iTunes, and the whole mesh web of streaming services by association. But more importantly, if you want to have all those things in one place and send us messages or talk awful shit about us or any of the above, Twitter's the place, because we're not the .com type of people. I've never been a .com person in my past. Shoedogg, you probably not so much either. So Twitter, make sure you follow us on there, and you can also send us emails directly.
I am really tired of being looked at as craggedy old and behind the times at 38 years old just because 5 years ago technology is still good enough for me.
You can just email us, shoedoggandmikepodcast@gmail.com. We do hang around on socials. I'm always on there. We got a follow from at PCWESNER, or Peyton Wesner, who is the newscast producer and reporter and podcast host for at NXT Wednesday. And I just thought it was cool that with our many established connections on Twitter with some other wrestling podcasts and stuff, seems like the wrestling community's checking it out a little bit.
Well, it's
so
at least,
we appreciate that.
It's at least vaguely the basis of what we like to talk about. You know, we don't want to consider ourselves a wrestling podcast. We're a bullshit podcast, man.
I don't know about you, but I'm not going to be picky with who wants to propagate this material.
Tell you what I'm ready to propagate. I'm ready to propagate the shot in front of us so we can kick this show off in style. Cheers. Okay, then. Last episode, you're probably right. You said we were off to a bit of a dark start because I brought up the world of politics.
Oh,
so
very
therefore,
dark.
You had said that you wanted to bring our first official subject to the table here, now that we've gotten some of the preambles out of the way, and that would be our recent reading materials.
Right. When somebody says to me, what's the use of paying money for or buying books or going to a bookstore when movies and music and books and just about everything else you can actually need in your life is online? You could, Kindles and people, but I'm a little old-fashioned that I like a book. I like to open it up, feel the pages. I like the way they smell.
We're terrible people.
I like seeing the stamp as to, okay, I know this copy came out during this period of production. If it becomes a famous book, then you can say, oh, I have the original copy versus the reissue, whatever. They become, just like you say with anybody would feel about a vinyl. They buy a record from their favorite band that was from the original printing of that album or something. So you do that with books too.
Yeah.
And it takes your mind off like you said, takes your mind off the doomsday.
Worth a lot.
You can read a book and kind of go away for a little while. You don't need to be sucked into whatever's on the news or the Facebook that day, or that week, or however. I'm not a binger. I don't get into a book and read 2/3 of it in one night.
Right.
I break it up over time. I find 20 minutes here. I find 15 minutes there. I bring books to work with me because occasionally, if I'm on lunch and I'm not hungry or I just have a couple minutes laying around, I'll crack open a book at work.
When he says 15 minutes here, 20 minutes there, much like most of us, you simply mean while you're having a good chat.
No. I mean literal downtime, because I'm not going to set aside separate reading time. Time is just going to have to fall into the downtime that I already have in my life.
We all should schedule more reading time.
It's almost like your own little mini vacation. You can be away from the noise and everything, or you could go down an interesting road. You could try to learn about something. You could try to learn a language. You could learn history, or you could just simply be escapist.
That's exactly right.
You could read Harry Potter's whole series from start to finish, or you could read something from historical texts that are equally as entertaining.
Reading is reading, whatever the format is. So you wanted me to go hit my
we both
first?
read, but you talk less about what you read than I do.
That's right. Well, because you read the smart shit, and I read things like Glenn Jacobs' autobiography. You know what? I'll tell you. I mean, obviously, Kane has got an incredible story from his rise through wrestling into the world of politics, his libertarianism, his fandom of Ron Paul, who he noted as the only person he was ever starstruck when he met. To be honest, I was surprised there wasn't more politics in the book that was subtitled "My Life in Wrestling and Politics." Like, what would you expect out of a Kane book?
I was actually just going to ask you how much of it got political, because to me it seems like it'd be the whole second act.
Right.
Wouldn't it?
It is not.
Because what is he, 53, 55, something?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There was, at best, maybe 50 pages relating to, I mean, he does spend a little bit of time on some economic theories that he abides by, but nothing too deep. I mean, that's all right. We don't want a complete economics exam from Kane.
He probably knows that.
And he'd be right. Although I think he's probably got more tales from the campaign trail and things like that he could have shared, because it was basically an 80% wrestling book. And the problem I'm beginning to find, I mean, admittedly, as someone who reads a lot of wrestling books, but wouldn't you say that's a captive audience? Like, not too many how many non-wrestling fans read Kane's book because he's the mayor? And we're like, oh, let's hear about his career as a professional wrestler before he was our mayor.
I would think that I would think that those people that read the book fall equally into two groups: hugely avid wrestling fans or hugely interested and engaged political science people. Because if you're someone who likes to learn about politicians and government and stuff, inevitably you'll come across his name, because he's kind of
he's a unique success story.
Exactly, and because of the fact that he has this background, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, let's be honest.
It's 90%. It's 90% column A. And here's the only problem I had with Kane's book. Again, the wrestling content was much higher than the political content. And not only that, but after reading a lot of various people's autobiographies, especially from that era, it's very redundant. It's like these books are written to people who don't know what the Montreal Screwjob was. Like, every fucking wrestling book I read does not need to have 15 pages on the Montreal Screwjob, but they all fucking do. Every person that was involved in wrestling during that era has to make sure they give you their take on the story or their opinion on the story. And then the ghostwriter says, oh, well, now we must provide background on this crazy tale. And it's like, similar to that, the territory system. Every wrestling book I read has, I swear to God, 5-10 page on explaining how Vince McMahon became the number one and how WWF became the number one. As if the people reading Kane's autobiography don't know those basic tenets of professional wrestling. I just think it's wasted words and it's filler, and I'm starting to see so much redundancy. Like JR's book, man. Jim Ross's book was very underwhelming for that very reason. A lot of it was just rehashed through the same trope we've always read about.
But that is wrestling's story, isn't it? So, I mean, tell me of another chain of events that's more compelling to either a wrestling or non-wrestling fan than the Montreal Screwjob. It's inevitably one of the pillars of wrestling history.
Well,
so of course everybody who's been alive at that time is going to give their take on it.
Like, you can tell us what you think about the Screwjob, but you really don't need to include 5 pages of the hows, whys, and whats of the Screwjob.
No.
But every one of these books does that, and that's where I'm like, it starts to get... And again, I think a lot of that's the ghostwriter, because the ghostwriter hears about the Montreal Screwjob, and it's like, oh, tell me more, that's interesting, without realizing that everybody who's read this book knows this story better than the fucking signing of the Declaration of Independence.
Well, but again, if you don't have anything else better to offer, or that you're willing to offer, I mean, wrestling has its own little micro society. It has its own conspiracy theories. I mean, when are wrestling fans going to get tired of, speculating on and reading a little backdoor literature about whatever really happened to Bruiser Brody or whatever happened with Jimmy Snuka? That's the kind of shit that you could really dig into and get 6-7 books out.
Well, that Dark Side of
the
Ring
But those people also have to be willing to get that shit published too.
Yeah. Have you seen any of those Dark Side of the Ring episodes that Vice has been putting out?
No.
Oh, those are great mini docs on some seedier stories.
Only time I watch the Vice channel is randomly at night, an episode of what's his face getting high and watching Ancient Aliens with his friends.
Oh, you were telling me
What's
about that.
dude's
Some
name?
rapper, right?
I guess it's funny as shit.
I don't even think I have the Vice channel, but I found them online, and they were.
That's
the
only
really
time
well
I do
good.
Vice is on accident. Like, oh,
yeah,
but it's a good channel.
So yeah. So anyway, so that was my not so deep reading of the last month. Although now I've broken into the USFL football for a buck book written by Jeff Pearlman, which with the XFL upon us is a very intriguing parallel to dig into at this time. So Mike, what do you got? What have you been reading?
Well, first I'll say you're a terrible salesman. I
wasn't trying to sell the book.
Well, so I was just going to ask you that.
I was fairly unimpressed by it.
Okay, so there you go. So I was going to ask you, is there any reason that someone would want to read it?
No, okay. There was not enough. There was not enough depth where people would have liked depth.
Yeah.
I mean, Kane talks about a few good. There's some things I didn't know. He talks about his very early career in Puerto Rico. He's got a couple good road stories. I mean, all wrestling books have that.
I think you're burned out. You got to change genres up once in a while. You got to change subject matter. You got to maybe pick a different period in history. Every once in a while, I get lucky, and somebody gives me a book or recommends a book to me that I get sucked into, which I got sucked into a book that I'm chipping away at right now, which, like I mentioned before, sometimes I get into it on my lunch break at work, but usually when I'm home, I'll pick it up 20 minutes, half an hour here or there. It's called Chaos, and it's the subtitle is Making a New Science, and author you may or may not have heard of, John Gleick, Gleick.
Okay.
Not familiar?
Not at all.
He's got a few. Nothing New York Times bestseller list that I'm aware of, famous-wise, but he's got a few books that people have definitely read. But basically, it's a nonfiction book about these group of up-and-coming scientists who, going back as far as whatever, the 70s, I think, they started this school of thought about science in general, which, if you really just want to translate science into a bland definition, you could call the way we understand the world around us. You could just, because through the scientific method, basically you're just observing what's there, right? That's all science is. So, how often does that really change? Well, we can go back to, Asimov or Isaac Newton or any of those people, but realistically, in spans of 10, 20, 30 years, not that much interesting happens. We live in a dark age now where people believe what their politicians tell them instead of following science and understanding what breakthrough science is making.
They believe what their handheld device tells them.
So that little 17-year-old rebel in me still likes to sometimes read books that are heavy in the subject matter of like science or investigation or outer space or anything that people have a really arrogant attitude about, like, oh, well, we know this and we know that. So this book is, in a narrative way, through a few of these guys, including someone that you've probably heard of, whose last name is Lorenz, Lorenz, the dude who gets always credited with discovering the butterfly effect.
Ah,
I'm sure you know what the butterfly effect means in general.
Yes, of course. It for the listeners, the fact that every reaction will spiral downhill into 100 more future reactions. So therefore, if you go back in time and it's represented on The Simpsons. Yeah. You go back in time and Homer steps on a bug.
So think of that idea as being like kind of the thread through the whole book.
Mm-hmm.
Not just the butterfly effect. It's obviously not a book about the butterfly effect because there's a ton of those already. But it's more about that school of scientists who started seeing basically like irregularities in deterministic systems. Things that they couldn't account for with what was considered well-established science. For example, they would just try to come up with something that they couldn't possibly explain, knowing everything they know. So one that I read in the early part of the book is turbulence in liquid. How do you explain turbulence in liquid? And they just, they say basically which one of these people kind of first observed and figured out there was something wrong there. And it's just weird because you come to realize that even in quote-unquote the scientific community, there's groups of people who see things in a completely different way. And for me, it's been really eye-opening, and it makes it a lot easier to understand why people don't see eye to eye on shit that you would figure has to be, like, pretty agreeable. The scientists don't even do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really interesting shit. It's really trippy. If you ever get, like, super high and you just want to grab a random spot in that book and start reading it, they have all these high, dense color pages of, I don't know what they're explaining because I haven't gotten that far in the book yet, but it's like a fractal wave or something, some kind of spectral colored tie-dye looking trippy ass shit that has some
cool.
It has some some trippy equations that correspond to it.
You just put on your Dead album and you sit back and enjoy.
It was very humbling though, because I started thinking, well, goddamn. So you could take everything that we know, everything in the known universe, and yet it would still have to, according to somebody at least, pass through an additional filter. Of like, oh, well, but have you understood gravity from this perspective that in some parts of the Earth, it's just weird. They basically find glitches in the Matrix is what these guys do.
Glitches in the Matrix.
You ever heard that term? But what they do is they make you realize that that shit that you is kind of always just like a passing thing for you, where like it pops in your head for a minute, where you see something, you're like blah blah blah, and then it kind of fades away. This is like a whole mechanism of observing the world, because James Blake does also do a great job of attaching everything to just enough like biographical shit about those scientists that you get a little bit of narrative in there too. So it's not just all throwing it at you like a textbook. It's telling it through the story of these guys' careers.
Okay,
it's pretty neat.
Well, that's good. Yeah,
I can't rate it.
That's how it. So it takes a narrative form while still providing a lot of information. Well, that's good. It's good to hear that.
I can't rate it as though I read the whole thing, but I will say, including the illustrations, which it was like its own little sideshow. That I'd if the book finishes as strong as it started, I'd probably recommend it to anybody. But it's a cheap one. It's one of those cheapies that you can, if you want to do paperback or you want to do like the digital. Do you ever do ebooks on?
Hell no.
One time I was trying to buy a comic book for Caleb online, and I thought I was simply ordering it to be shipped to my house from Amazon, and it turned out that I had downloaded like the Amazon digital comic book. I was pissed.
Oh, that was foolish of you.
Well, and I got the Chaos book from a family friend who basically, I wouldn't have assumed where they would have got it from, but sure enough, I did look it up, and it's on everything. It's on Amazon. It was great. So far, so good. Really trippy shit, though. Imagine that. Imagine just, like, one day you have a revelation that, like, the observable world is... Nothing's been completely, fully understood yet. Ironically, you would say, oh, maybe that's a thick read. I don't necessarily need to go that hard when I read a book.
Uh-huh.
But in a twist of fate, it's so much of a mindfuck that it kind of drags you out of reality anyway. Just not the same way as something that makes you laugh.
Nice. So Chaos, so what was the author's name again?
James Blake.
James Blake.
Gleick.
All right.
And again, it was a gift to me, but it's pretty much everywhere. If you can get a cheap paperback of it online, then that means you can get it pretty much anywhere, right?
Yeah, sure. Fair enough.
You know more about book sites and stores than I do, but I would assume you could walk into a Barnes & Noble and it'd be right there.
Probably. And maybe in the social sciences section. Sometimes things are in weird categories in the Barnes & Noble store. And
you sound like you've been to a Barnes & Noble way more recently than me, because I couldn't even name a section in there other than, like, horror.
Nice. Yeah, it is kind of funny that your book was entitled Chaos, because the one thing I wanted to kind of rib you about here, as it were.
A rib.
Couple of shows back, I revealed the fact that I got suckered into getting WWE 2K20, and now I have played a little bit of a video game that I never would have thought I would have played a day in my life. As typical with people our age, I'm a few years behind the times of what's cool and what's current. Although this game is still immensely popular, I guess probably still as popular as ever. And I have you to blame for this, because I watched it over here a little bit the other night. More so because the kids were playing it. Because this game is all the rage amongst the... I mean, I guess adults are playing it too. I mean, I think everybody's playing this fucking game. But talking about the Fortnite.
Mm-hmm. You'd be surprised, man. If you go on Sandman's Twitter, most of the pictures he uploads are him taking, and not screenshots, but him taking a picture of the TV screen with his phone when he wins.
Sandman loves that. Well, I've actually got one of these on my phone. It's funny you say that, because the first game that I played solo, when I got it at home, I won. I won my first fucking match.
Battle Royale?
Battle Royale style.
Huh.
Now my question is, that makes me wonder, and I don't find any shame in this, and it would make sense, is that they probably match you reasonably with people of a similar level. So since I was a noob, I was probably matched with a bunch of noobs.
I have no idea how that works.
Which is how I managed to survive. But this leads to a... What do you think of the game? I mean, you played it some.
Caleb wanted something that was as exciting as Apex Legends, but not quite as cutthroat. And luckily for us, both games are free.
Right.
So we kind of, at one point, we had both, and he was the one who told me about Apex Legends, and I played it a couple times. It's fun. But then ultimately, at school and pretty much with his friends and everybody else, it's Fortnite.
Yeah.
And he had already, got me to sink money into I don't want to call it swag, but
it's
Fortnite.
All just costumes.
Well, he had a little stuffed llama, which is a something from the game where I guess you find loot in it or something like that.
Oh, you bought him like tchotchkes related to the game.
And actually, got him a harvesting tool from the GameStop.
Okay.
Which, like, if you don't have the pickaxe, but you have some kind of upgraded character, they carry various things besides a pickaxe.
Just don't start letting him ring up hundreds of dollars on costumes.
It's 100% on my son.
Yeah. But
I like it because it's not. To me, it's not a step down in gameplay from Apex Legends.
Yeah, and you said it good. It's less cutthroat. I mean, for the first time I did encounter the game a little while back. Someone else showed it to me, and I do love the way the map shrinks as the game goes on. Because you start out in this just absolutely massive fucking world that you can explore. But, as the time goes and as the thing, it's very natural, and it's really cool the way it narrows it down. So anyway, yes, my first match, pretty much by default, I just jumped right in. I didn't alter my character appearance. I didn't do shit. I just jumped right in, start game. Like you said, it's called Battle Royale. It's, 100 versus everybody, typical normal mode. And I won, and that was fucking great. So then I won. I got through that, and then I started the next match. And the next match starts, and all of a sudden, there are beacons on my radar map. Now, in the previous game, I didn't have beacons on my radar map. And I'm like, okay, well, that's interesting. And then as the game goes on, I'm just playing. Now, I don't play with any of the fucking helmet, the headset. I don't talk to people. I don't do online gaming. This is almost virgin territory for me. Keep your jokes to yourself. As far as gaming goes, to play something that's online.
Oh, yeah, nobody's going to make the Virgin and Fortnite connection.
Exactly. And, and so, I go into the next game, and at this moment, I'm out of ammo. And I'm right next to one of these guys that have the beacon on them. And I got no ammo except for grenades, and I just start chucking grenades at him. Now, again, I'm not wearing the headset. I am not interacting with other people in any way. All of a sudden, out of nowheres, my TV is filled with somebody screaming at me in some nature of Spanish dialect. I'm thinking from South America. The only words I understood was Shoedogg. Shoedogg. Yes, that is my PlayStation name. And then finally, after like 30 seconds of being frantically yelled at by Juan Valdez, I realized, oh fuck, I'm in some kind of a team battle and I'm attacking my own homie. So I made no changes as far as I know to the settings of the game. I just started the next match. And now I do understand how I changed that on accident. And so it was just fucking so funny. Like, I'm just playing the game and all of a sudden I am just getting screamed fucking at.
Bravo.
But at the end of all that, our team won. And I played a game earlier today, and I won. I think I should quit while I'm ahead, 3-0 in the world of fucking Fortnite, bitches!
I think a bigger achievement was how much racism you were able to cram into that last little clause where you're talking about Juan Valdez and your homies all of a sudden. Just totally thrown from second to third gear.
Look, man, I told you, the fucking guy sounded like he was from South America. What else do you want from me? Jesus Christ.
So what else did you learn from Juan Valdez? Are you going to go back and play it again, or are you going to quit while you're ahead?
That's a good question. It was. Did
you add him as a friend? So you can learn his real name? And Fortnite, like you said, you can slow down, you can speed it up. It can be just as
it's
bang or as elaborate as you want it to be.
Yeah, it's a cool first-person shooter that's not like Call of Duty insane. I mean, if you're a somewhat of a novice and you jump into Call of Duty online, you are going to get smoked.
You don't strike me as the type of person that just routinely checks in on HGTV or the Do-It-Yourself channel to see what the latest programming is. But there's a show called Hometown Takeover.
Okay.
Where HGTV, which is pretty much a home improvement channel, which with various spins on it. I don't know if you ever got to see, if you got in on the madness of Chip and Joanna Gaines. Fixer Upper was a big hit.
I missed that, man.
They have their own merchandise line.
God,
you go to Target, walk to the end of the main front aisle in Target where they have all the homeware and the dishes and everything. There'll be a whole display that takes up like 12 square feet of just, Fixer Upper branded stuff, candles, plates, shelves.
I don't know what makes me more out of touch, not being up to date with Fortnite or not being up to date with HGTV programming. I am so out of fucking touch.
It's how our society is, how we feed the consumer culture, though. Because you see it on TV, next thing you know, the missus says, "Hey, that shiplap would look great in our living room," and you're thinking, "Well, shit, that's probably expensive, right?" And that's basically what that channel's for. But they do kind of like Guy Fieri and a couple other cooking shows have those local flavor shows. HGTV does one where they go to a town that's got some thread to it, whether it's historically relevant or it's the birthplace of something or whatever, and they try to, illuminate the culture. Basically, hey, America, here's this little spot that a lot of people they consider it precious, but you've never heard of it, and, that kind of thing. Not so much like one of your morning news things where it's like very vanilla and somebody's like, and tell us about this building.
Yeah.
But more so like, almost like a History Channel light. Mm-hmm. So our lovely hometown, and we'll call it as a home zip code. Because it's not like...
Not my zip code.
Yeah, we don't really live... we're not born and bred into the culture of it. I'm not. My family's not from Bangor.
We're in the
I'm
area.
not from Bangor. You're not from Bangor.
Right.
It's 5 minutes down the road.
Yeah.
So you know Bangor, and it's essentially falls under the general blanket of Steel Belt or Rust Belt towns. It's one of those towns that used to have industry, and it thrived, and it didn't really make plans for after the industry left. So now it's kind of dumpy, and it has a lot of big city problems for being so small.
Same as the old coal towns that have been virtually abandoned.
I mean, how could you have, there's nothing to do, there's no opportunity really. So people there, they start to grow up, they get bored, they get into trouble, right?
They make podcasts, they do shit like that.
Because it's not the greatest downtown. As you know, it's 2 stoplights, right? A bar.
It's a bar and a pizza joint,
exactly.
A Chinese restaurant.
And you could probably say that about how many towns in America?
And a gas station.
Thousands.
Yeah.
You could go out all the way across Pennsylvania, probably Ohio, find tons of them. We have been lucky to see some of the quote-unquote culture up close. Not in any specific order, but just being at the wrong bar, being out at the wrong hour of the night, standing on the wrong street.
And none of those things equate culture.
And all of a sudden, the description of if somebody had to write a postcard for Bangor doesn't really line up with what you're seeing and hearing anymore at some point. So, in the interest of reversing what they might, I guess, think is either, I don't even think they think it's a negative public perception. I think that they just think, hey, we're doing everything right. If people could just see it, more businesses would come into town, even though there's nowhere to park.
Yeah.
More people would pump money into the community. It's supposed to be like, to them, it's like Bar Rescue, but for a town. Right? Except I don't know if they yell and scream. I think they just, oh my God. I don't even know if there's a cash award. It's a good question. But if you want to be on the show, someone who represents your community has to submit a video to HGTV and say basically, hey, here we are. This is a little bit about us. Come check us out. Not, I would say, semi-surprisingly to me, Bangor did submit a video. I think, in fact, a couple of years ago, there might have been an episode of that show that's about people who have ghosts that haunt their pets.
Oh, God.
I think that House from Bangor was on that. But they're trying to say, this is like a long infomercial, right? Would you say it's kind of like an infomercial? If it's going to be a one-sided view, it's going to be overly flattering. all the positive characteristics.
Yeah, they're not going to be like, hey, come smoke crack under the viaduct in Bangor.
So how long of an episode do you think it would be if they were to only focus on Bangor's best and brightest, the tourism, the business district?
What tourism? For fucking what?
Exactly. I want the episode to be called For Fucking What, if they get selected, which we know they won't.
Let's just see what this godforsaken... I'm afraid of this thing.
But I was just going to tell you that...
You have to put a link up on Shore here so people can see this.
Yes.
This is our home region, and it's, I'm sure, quote-unquote, finest.
I'm going to tweet the link, and then it's going to be in the description on the podcast itself for a link to this video, which, before I even got my hands on it, was already being very widely circulated on the internet. And, it's called Hometown Takeover. And basically... the takeaway that I got from it was that the only people who actually vouched for Bangor were business owners and the mayor.
It's the mayor's fucking job.
In other words, the people who have the vested financial interest in, the town doing well and getting some kind of financial boost out of it. But they made this video, and not surprisingly, these little vignettes of people giving their 2 cents as to why it's such a great place to live and visit and spend money in. And I thought you might want to get a look at it since you didn't see it yet. Tell me what you think when we're all done.
First female elected mayor of Bangor, Pennsylvania. We are an hour and 15 minutes away from Manhattan. We're an hour and 15 minutes away from Philadelphia. We could be a great little destination town for New York and Philadelphia. We are also a town that is a 5-minute drive to the Appalachian Trail. Bangor today is a community that has lost its identity, unfortunately.
As they show a house condemned.
Our past, but we don't know where we're headed in the future. I think if we want to go back,
they're showing the best of Bangor right
Slade was king.
Now, hold on a second. Before they go into the historical piece, I just want to point out that the whole premise was could be when they were talking about it being a destination town.
Yeah, they're not saying that it is.
Like we wouldn't have figured it out at this point. Yeah.
Oh, you're 5 minutes from the Appalachian Trail. People flock here.
It was very expensive to quarry slate, but as a result, what it did was bring a lot of wealth into...
Yeah, blah, blah, blah. A bunch of shit that happened like 120 years ago.
They're explaining the background.
That hasn't been relevant for 3 generations. I mean, do you know anybody who's living off slate money?
Nope.
Like, my grandparents, they own the old quarry back on Seven Hills.
My name is Crystal Bessinger. I'm the owner of Chocolates on Broadway. Chocolates on Broadway is a... family-owned business since 1978. It's been here over 100 years of making homemade chocolates. I envision for a better Bangor, more downtown businesses. I also would like to see more residents able to support those downtown businesses, and also find a way to bring in customers from other communities to come into our town. It would be wonderful to see some of the houses fixed up inside and out. And to give some people who can't afford to do the repairs a better quality of life.
Okay, so don't take the bait on that one. But the lady was talking about how, basically what? What does this town need? One lady said customers. One lady said...
money for the customers who are
And then
here.
the other lady said money for the people to live there to be able to support the businesses that need the customers. Mm-hmm. So the message that they're sending is essentially, we are as fucking broke as a small town can get.
Yeah, everybody is at the fucking poverty
and they give you no reasons
area.
for why to come here outside of patronizing those businesses.
Trying to keep these, yeah, right.
Oh, you know what? We need more businesses because the rest of the town is what exactly? Anyway, not impressive, but I think when you let it go all the way to the end, you'll see one thing that stands out to you, and you don't have to be from Bangor to get a kick out of this. Anyway, go ahead.
Director of Bloom. We are a residential program for women survivors of trauma, trafficking, and addiction. And it's a great way for us to interact with our wonderful community.
Well, there's nothing funny about that.
But Bangor has that?
Yeah, it does. Socially progressive. But again...
It would bring more people to see...
It's not socially progressive, man. Bangor's probably voted 80% for fucking Trump.
It doesn't matter. She's talking about that's a place where women who are abuse victims and trauma victims... can go to do art. That has nothing to do with who people vote for.
No, it's
a socially progressive business.
That business is, yes.
Right, which is how you can tell it's so out of place in Bangor.
Yes,
but anyway,
exactly. The area is not socially progressive.
There's only a minute more.
I think if we did win,
the ice cream parlor.
making the economy. I think it would boost it. Like there's a destination here. There really are things to see here in Bangor that are so beautiful that would put, I think, Bangor on the map, and people would want to stop by here and check us out. And I think like a vision that I have is there are some empty lots that are here, and to use them to our advantage of a parking lot. We have two.
Okay.
Is that Bangor's problem? Not enough parking? Is that what she's saying?
I would agree to an extent. Because, face it.
Well, nobody likes on-street parking, but that's the up and the downside of having a main street.
Well, but it's a lot nicer way of saying, hey, listen, if you park on one of these side streets when you come here to patronize a business, you might bump into some meth heads, who are trying to hit you up for cigarette money. That's what they're saying. When I proposed adding a parking lot in place of a store that had closed down, people said, well, who's going to want to park there and then patronize the businesses that are over here? And it was basically them saying, hey, it's not a town worth walking through. I admit it.
Right.
There's no reason to stay here other than to, stop at a store. Now, here's where a bit of Shoedogg and Mike history comes in.
I heard
when we talk about our park system. And go.
Bangor Memorial Park. Bangor Memorial Park is actually a large complex with a community pool. Actually, it's where our local high school plays all of its football games.
Wow, they have a high school who plays football? Bangor's amazing.
Our high school football team does not play at the high school. Pimlico Park has lots of places for expansion. So, for instance, we can put in a community garden and a dog park, and it would be just another place for my neighbors to gather and to visit with one another.
Okay.
Amazing.
I thought they were going to skate out of there without saying another word about Penico Park. But for people who are not familiar with Penico Park, that name actually goes back quite a ways. But for anybody who grew up in a dumpy area where you had like the park where people took their kids, and then you had the park where like people gambled on basketball and drank during the day, Penico was that park. It was the shady, not, where fist fights happened and where people bought and sold drugs, and even now.
I was going to say, more importantly, it was across the street from the legendary Sportsman's Bar where the notorious former mayor of Bangor, Janice, used to sell cocaine to the patrons at the bar.
And honestly, man,
while he was mayor.
I think we've seen enough. My point is, you can put lipstick on a pig, right? But it's still a pig.
Their attempt at shining up Bangor was about as bad as I expected it to be when you told me of the existence of this video.
If this was a commercial for something, would you buy
it? I could name 5,000 towns off the top of my head. I would rather go visit.
Let me ask you a better question.
After that.
Okay, here's a better question. If you were driving from New York to Philly,
no, I wouldn't stop in Bangor.
No, that wouldn't be enough to sway.
I'd rather stop at the goddamn Waffle House off of I-80 than end up.
Well, let's say you didn't
Bangor.
know what you do know about Bangor. Let's say you had no idea how seedy it is and how many gross people there are.
No, that video did nothing to paint it as absolutely anything out of the ordinary. If they think that presentation is going to somehow lead to like a Jim Thorpe like Renaissance, they're barking up the wrong damn tree.
I'm with you.
That's clearly the only thing they could go for. That's what Jim Thorpe did. They were an old coal town that fucking reinvigorated themselves, and many of them found themselves in that boat.
Yeah.
They really did.
Well, some win, some don't. You can point to Bethlehem and say, well, as the president does, say that that's an example of a town that, quote-unquote, pulled itself up by its bootstraps.
Well, he did that.
No, well, he takes credit for it.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
But nevertheless, it happened. They are another one that you could say, oh, well, industry left, and then...
Donald Trump being president is why the casino built there 10 years ago.
We can all agree.
They knew.
We can all agree that had he not come through, it would still be just the driveling mess that it is.
Well, they almost built an arena down that area that could have taken the place of the PPL Center. We could have been, instead of going to a casino down there, you could have been going down there to see when WWE came to town.
Where was that supposed to be?
Somewhere's in that, when Bethlehem Steel first closed and that whole tract of land was just up for fucking grabs.
Right.
They almost built the arena on 191 where Nazareth Speedway was. They almost built one down where the Sands ended up.
Okay.
And we ended up with the PPL Center.
It seemed to me like that once the casino was bought and paid for and planned, that just kind of like popped up out of the ground like nothing.
Well, actually, that's very close to a place where I did go. I used to still watch WWE. That's right on the other side of the mountain from Stabler Arena.
Yeah. Well, that was more.
They
to
used
me,
to do wrestling challenge and superstars tapings there a few times back in the day.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's kind of a little bit before my time, because although I did go to some shows at Stabler, I wasn't part of like the Stabler scene, if you want to call it a scene, where they. What was it? The Bud Carson's Pro Wrestling Museum we went to, which is still around in some capacity.
Great shit. He still does the autograph events every couple months.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't really have like a firm brick and mortar anymore.
No, he left his store. No, but you know what they put in there at the Merchant Square Mall? There's now an arcade.
Okay.
Big ass arcade.
But when I visited Bud's, I come to learn that here he has this massive tape library of shows from Ag Hall from WWF. And I'm like, I always think back to the 90s. You could go see ECW at Ag Hall.
Mm-hmm. Oh, WWF lived there for like 10 years.
Didn't realize
every TV
So
tape.
Stabler was probably even a step up from that.
Yeah, it was after that, yeah.
And now it's like, we wouldn't slum at Stabler.
Nope.
For me, the most fun I have at a wrestling show, it has to somehow involve the venue. Absolutely love what AEW is doing with trying to pick out these buildings that kind of stand out on their own a little bit when they do a show there. It's going to be on TV. So you're not looking at the same backdrop every time.
Yep.
Absolutely love that. But I kind of like going to some dingy fire hall or whatever, or multi-event center. To me, that carries a lot of the same vibe as if you go to like a really dank, crowded heavy metal concert.
Yeah, just like ECW arena shows. Yeah, when you go to the big arena, like if you go to see Raw in the 15,000 seat arena, it's filled with families, it's filled with sanitized bullshit.
But let's not kid ourselves. Part of the enjoyment that we get from option B is that it's like mostly a bunch of dudes that are just being their uncensored selves and kind of stumbling around drinking and being stupid.
I think this deserves a shout out to fucking KSW, our buddy Frank in Pittsburgh, with the yearly Brawl Under the Bridge events.
Now that's a venue.
Yep.
You talk about taking a otherwise not notable local landmark and making it into its own thing.
Dude, in Homestead, Pennsylvania, right outside of Pittsburgh, they've done this event 5 years running this year. Every year the attendance has been bigger. Last year when we were out there, they drew about 800 people.
That's a July thing, right? Traditionally?
Yep, in July. Yep.
So I believe we follow them on Twitter, so if you don't follow the promotion that's behind that, you should find them either on our Twitter or just search for them.
Such a unique venue to see wrestling, and that does add an awful lot to the fucking presentation, especially when they start brawling into 6th Street and across the railroad tracks.
And to me, that's a thing that's been gone from wrestling for a little while.
Absolutely.
That I think desperately needs to come back. Not that anything particularly amazing or unique to Ag Hall happened when I went there, but it was this sort of memorable. It made an impression on you just in its environment.
Every single week, if you watch Monday Night Raw, it could, in essence, be filmed in a studio that seats 15,000 people, and it will look exactly the same every fucking week.
Oh, you could
none of these arenas, none of these arenas have any flash. Well, hell, you talk about Ag Hall, man. Some of the 1994 Raws I was at up at the Fernwood Event Center in Bushkill. That little fucking barn that had the huge 20-foot-long sign on the wall that said Fernwood Event Center. You could see it on Raw. Like, you're literally looking at Raw, and there's just this giant ghetto-ass banner behind there. That's where they filmed. Or when they were in the high school gym, and you could actually see the basketball hoops behind where they hung the banners.
You have just perfectly illustrated the reason why I think WWE, in the long run, has positioned itself to be more of a global business than a piece of Americana as they used to propose themselves to be. Because of things like that. Because the WWE doesn't care to promote something like HGTV doing a hometown takeover. They don't care to promote the Daily's Place to India and Japan and China. Right. So if every arena looks exactly like, that could be in Tokyo, that could be in Berlin, then that's what they want.
They want a uniform appearance.
But that also makes it suck.
Sanitized.
It makes it suck.
Yeah.
One of my favorite wrestling shows ever attended as a 15-year-old boy, by the way, side note, felt like the king of the fucking hill because it was one of those rare times as a minor where my parents gave me permission to basically be left on my own for a few hours in a strange place away from home.
Wait, you mean your mom wouldn't accompany you to a wrestling show?
I got dropped off right in front of the Hamburg Fieldhouse, which is on your way across PA, headed towards Harrisburg. Random little town, not much to say about it other than that they had a big open fire hall looking place there. And I went to a show, and this is in May. So at that time, kind of getting a little warm. No fucking air conditioning in this place. Just ceiling fans that were so high above you, they might as well not be on. They're like 60 feet in the fucking rafters, you know. And you've got this huge ECW crowd that are just dripping in sweat, and everything smells like beer and cigarettes, and you can't walk away from people to get a different flavor. This place was like literally like being at a fucking Metallica concert.
Mm-hmm.
But at a wrestling show. And if you ask me...
That was the vibe of ECW. That's why it was great.
Right, but if I tell you that story, and then I tell you a story about a show I went to at Ag Hall, they don't feel like the same show to me. How many Monday Night Raws or NXT tapings at Full Sail would you go to before you suddenly were like, well, that's done everything it's going to do for me?
If I lived where it was every single week? If it was like the ability to go to every week?
I'm telling you, that's the X factor that's going to make AEW a long-term success. They're going to be able to keep their sites focused on local. Not necessarily local, like down-home local, but local, like not having to bridge every international boundary at the same time.
Yeah, they're just trying to hit every U.S. market, man. They're just making their way across the country.
And that is the secret.
Bit by bit.
To me, that's the secret business genius that Vince McMahon does not account for when he says, oh, well, they're not really competition. In a sense, you're right, but they're also, to me, they're going to have much more success just on that basis. That they're not necessarily attacking the exact same audience as you.
Mm-hmm.
You're just going to siphon off enough of WWE's viewers that it makes you notice. If you look for @ShoeDoggM on Twitter, I want to post a link to this video. It's from a Japanese morning talk show. So I just want to preface it with that. Because we all know Japanese TV is whatever the fuck it is. They had some random...
Japanese TV is amazing.
I can't remember off the top of my head who the band was, but it's some like band that's like current and hot in the U.S., and they go on to play this Japanese morning show, and they go absolutely bonkers, like Dillinger Escape Plan violent on the stage. They're jumping off of their speakers. They're fucking wrecking the set.
People are fucking terrified.
And no. Way better. All these Japanese like co-hosts that are wearing suits like Michael Strahan and Katie Couric, they're all just standing there as this destruction and chaos is unfolding, and they're clapping along to the beat like they are so happy that this happened on their show.
Go zero. Well, yeah.
And what makes it stand out to you is it looks like a scene from a movie because it's this totally crazy shit happening in this very obviously Japanese environment. What do I mean by that? A lot of bright lights, a lot of bright colors. You know, the camera's cutting around a lot. You know that Japanese style.
Shit superimposed on the screen.
Except it's some like American hardcore band, like and they're fucking just.
Dude, they probably thought it was amazing, like if Gwar were to appear in Japan or something like that.
Yeah, that's what we need more of.
Gwar in Japan?
No, just memorable shit. Like you said, you're not a collector. You go for the experiences.
Dude, everything's been done, man. It's hard to create something new these days, let's be honest.
Well, every time we go to a show, that's what we're hoping for, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're hoping for a take-home moment that nobody else can lay claim to.
Absolutely right.
Which is what the podcast is, too, right?
Exactly what I was going to get at.
We hope every episode has
a once-in-a-lifetime experience, man. We're just bringing you what we got. I hope you're enjoying it. Tell you what, I guess about ready to call it a night here.
Sure.
So again, please tell your friends. Make sure you subscribe, like, follow us. We're on SoundCloud, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, and now iTunes. Every place you can find us. Anything to add, Mike?
No, man. I'm excited to reach the wider universe as we keep jumping around to new platforms. But we want to hear from them, too. So
we that's the thing. We need to hear from you guys, man. Well, all the things you mentioned. Twitter, ShoeDoggM. You know, the email, ShoeDoggandMike@gmail, or ShoeDoggandMikePodcast, @gmail.com. You know, reach out to us. Anything you got a feel of the way we like to bullshit. So what would you like to hear us bullshit about? Give us some suggestions, some topics.
Sure, and I'll put it to you this way. If you have time to take a quiz to find out what kind of dish rag you are, then you have time to drop us a like or a retweet, too. Don't be shy about it. We thrive on that, and it's part of the reason we do it, because we want to hear your voice and get an idea of what more you want out of us.
I came up as a raggedy plaid dish rag.
What am I missing on the punchline there?
Plaid, just a plaid dish rag that's all raggedy and beat
I could
up.
buy it, because I would think that somebody who never met you before or heard you talk from like 50 feet away, they might go, "Is that guy Scottish?"
Well, either that or it's based on Tom Steyer's infamous plaid tie, the only tie that Tom Steyer owns.
I was going to say, you must be a much bigger Tom Steyer person than me.
Oh, I am.
I've never seen him long enough to know that he was even wearing a tie.
Or pants, for that matter.
Yeah, no, I just assume he's the one that looks like Michael Bloomberg that's taller, right? He's an old white guy. How do you tell these old white guys apart?
And he doesn't want to take away our supersized colas.
How do you honestly tell all these white guys apart? You gotta give them little gimmicks. Yeah.
I'd like to think that I stand out in a police lineup, Mike.
Well, Bernie's like the most hunched over. So without having to do racial stereotypes of like who sounds the most Jewish, because we know who that is. You could say who's the shortest, who's the tallest, and then you got who's the most Republican, right? Which is Mayor Pete, basically.
I would say at this point he's the most centrist.
But like, yeah, look how many people has been turned off by that already now. How many people that were getting excited to vote for a woman or a black woman or a Native American or a Spanish guy or whatever.
Exactly.
I think on that note, we should pack it in.
Let's pack it in. Thank you for joining us. The big episode 11 of the Shoedogg and Mike podcast. We'll be back soon with episode 12. Till then, thanks again. If you have an hour to waste, please indeed waste it with us.